You've just highlighted one of the key issues. You've been highlighting it. It's been a recurrent theme throughout this discussion. The fact that we are, in a society where the difference between the haves and the have-nots is widening, and this pandemic has experienced very much what I would characterize as a K-shaped recovery, where there has been that bifurcation has in many ways been exacerbated. Now, 6 days ago, the Justice Department filed a lawsuit against Google. Now, Google, the FANG stocks, tech companies, big tech, have certainly seemed to be on the upper part of that K and have been beneficiaries of possibly the pandemic, but certainly have recovered more strongly. Now, the question here from Ikram Haq is whether we might see a potential breakup of big tech within the next 4 years. Now, he says irrespective of who wins the presidency, but I'd like to understand, actually, is there a key difference? If we're under a Biden or a Trump presidency, do you see any difference in the position towards big tech? And this is obviously something that will affect the markets and the viewers on the session.
So I want to recommend a book to everybody. It's called Monopolies: Life in the Age of Corporate Power. And it was written by a journalist by the name of David Dayen, Dayen. I think it's a very important book. I interviewed him for Salt Talks a few months ago. You could find that on our website. But I think it's a very important book that addresses this. And so to really understand monopoly power is actually long-term very destructive to an economically organized society. And so what the current big tech guys have done a great job of is they've curried favor with American politicians. They've lobbied them and given them a lot of money. And so American politicians have been off their back, and a result of which they have created this vast amount of power. And it's destructive, because what ends up happening is, whether you like it or not, it's human nature and it's human incentives where things align. Apple will talk to Google. I'll stay out of search. You stay out of this part of the business. I'll do this, you do that. And all of a sudden you get something called predatory pricing. Now, if you read David's book, he'll tell you that we've been busting monopolies for 1,500 years. Why do we bust monopolies? Because when they get too powerful, they start to switch prices on the consumer, and they try to make themselves more and more powerful, and they try to eliminate competition. Okay, so in the beginning, it's fine. Predatory pricing, price goes down. They tell the politician, well, we've lowered the price. The consumer's directly benefiting from us. And then all the competition is dead, and then the price goes asymmetric. And so what I would tell everybody to do is go back to 1984 in the Reagan administration, a quote unquote conservative administration, where Judge Harold Green broke up the AT&T monopoly and turned it into 7 different telephone holding companies, and then said all those licenses, all those patents at Bell Laboratory that you guys have worked on, that you've been sitting on, you now need to allow companies or new companies to have a license on those things. And so what ended up happening is it unleashed this mega technological evolution for the world. And so the great irony is Google, Facebook, Amazon, all of these companies today benefited from that 1984 breakup, where we were literally paying $1 or $2. If I wanted to call Dubai, forget about it. It was a $4 a minute call. Now we're doing this call on Zoom, relatively costless, if not costless. And so the point being is, you have to break these companies up. Now, those companies will be super pissed at me. I'll probably get shadow banned on Twitter for saying that, but that's fine. And it doesn't mean bad things for those companies, and it doesn't mean bad things for the shareholders of those companies. If anything, if you look at the A&T breakup and the offshoot, everybody that owned A&T that got shares in each of those other companies did very, very well. But these companies have to be broken up, and they have to be right-sized, whether we like it or not. And lo and behold, the Antitrust Department of the United States is bringing a lawsuit against Google. My last point on this, I want everybody to go back to Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt, he brought everybody into what is now the Roosevelt Room, and he basically said, hey, man, we got to cut the nonsense out here. We've got to stop the robber baron nature of what's going on in the United States. You're raping and pillaging and taking too much plunder for yourselves, and we're not helping the average person. And there was a book that moved Teddy Roosevelt that was written by Jacob Riis, R-I-I-S. He was he's from Holland. He was a Dutch journalist in the United States, and he wrote a book which became a bestseller in the early 1900s, How the Other Half Lived. And what he wrote about is that the East New York tenements were collapsing on each other because there were no building codes and no building standards, and these poor immigrants were coming into the country. They were building these plywood structures for them, and they didn't have the right building codes, and so these things were collapsing on each other and killing them. But these business owners had power, and the consumer had no power, and a result of which this ultimately created a long-term harm to the society. And so the irony is it's been hijacked by the left, but Teddy Roosevelt was a Republican, and he was the founder of the idea of progressivism. And what was the idea? The idea was, okay, we got to empower and protect these people. Now, listen, I'm a lifelong Republican. I may not be if Mr. Trump wins. I may have to switch parties or create a new party, frankly, because he's hijacked that party. It doesn't even look like the old Republican Party. But as a Republican, I'm all about unequal outcomes. I believe in unequal outcomes, but we better figure out a way to create a platform of equal opportunity in our country. And for that matter, your countries. We have to figure this out. And if we can do that, we'll have great peace, we'll have great prosperity. That is historically sound ideas. You can take that back over 5,000 years, and I'm telling you, that works. Okay, so where we are right now, those companies are smothering innovation just like AT&T did 36 years ago. And I would suggest to those companies, they were born from the breakup of AT&T. They need to be broken up, and they need to be broken up in a way that will unleash a lot more economic innovation in the future. So I'm sorry that's so long-winded, but if you read that book, I think he makes a very good, very crystallized statement of why we need to do this and why the companies, the shareholders of those companies, will recognize it's in the best interest of everybody, including shareholders for that matter, to do that.